Well, thank you, ladies. I don't see any gentlemen for tuning in. That tells you what age I am, and for being willing to listen to a little bit of what happened to me when I lived in East Africa for 10 years. I was once the principal of the best fashion college in all of Africa. Well, that was what the blurb said. I was living at the time before I went out to Africa. It was 1986 and I was 30 and I was running a small fashion business in Leith in Edinburgh on Bernard Street at the back of a printer's shop. My sewing machine was going as fast as it could, but I still wasn't earning my fortune. I was a little bit disappointed. I was also in a relationship which was also going nowhere. So a business and a relationship that was going nowhere. So I was a bit at a crossroads in my life. And I wondered what on earth what more life had to offer. And then on one of those sliding door moments, I met Ishbel on the bus. And Ishbel was a friend of a friend. I didn't know her that well. And I got on the bus down to Leith, and she said that she was going to Nairobi for a year on a Commonwealth teaching exchange. And I sat and I listened in awe of this. She said she was going to Nairobi for 1 year, and her exchange partner would be coming to Edinburgh to teach for 1 year. Unfortunately, that the Commonwealth exchange teaching program doesn't exist anymore, which I think is a great shame. And when I was listening to it, I just felt something visceral, something struck me in my stomach. I felt that's amazing. And from out of nowhere, I said to her, can I come and visit you on holiday? And she was a bit taken aback because I didn't know her that well, but she was too polite to say no. And she said, yeah, you can come on holiday. So that evening I went home and I told my boyfriend of the time, I said, I'm going to Kenya on holiday. And he said, well, if you're going to Kenya, I'm going to Canada. And I thought, well, that just sums up our relationship. Continents apart. So I went the following September, I went on holiday to Kenya. And it was a holiday that changed my life. And at the end of the 3 weeks, I knew that I was going to come back. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I just knew that I was going to go back to Kenya and live and work there. And because one of the reasons I thought that there was opportunities there for fashion designers, because fashion was everybody looked to the West for their inspiration for fashion. And I thought I could go there and I could design things. I could teach the students, the local grown talent. And that's what I decided. I just knew that I was going to do it. And when I came back from holiday, I had been friends with Ishbel's exchange partner, Richard, who's here with his tartan pinion. And he said, well, I'll look for a job for you when I go back after, when I go back. And he had been back for about 2 months, and he he phoned me up and he said, I found you a job. And I thought, oh, that's amazing. He said, yes, in the best fashion college in all of Africa. And I thought, wow. And I thought he meant to be a tutor. But in fact, he said, no, not a tutor. It's the principal's job. And I went, and I was a bit taken aback, considering I had very little teaching experience, because I had done some sewing night classes, and I'd taught at Queen Margaret College in the costume department for a few hours. And I said, oh, all right then. And I thought, well, she's obviously the woman that owns the college, the proprietor of the college, obviously recognizes talent when she sees it. And I put to the back of my mind that I didn't have any teaching experience. And so I went to the college the following, I'd been on holiday, I had come back, went in September, and the following September, I went back out to Nairobi to live. And I'd like to read you just a little bit of my first impressions of the college. At the top of the sloping drive, there was a wooden board declaring that this was the entrance to Evelyn College of Design. A board which looked as if it had been painted by an apprentice signwriter on work placement. First impressions were key. I curated a rig out fit for the launch of a head-hunted tropical professional. Leather-trimmed canvas briefcase, obligatory for important correspondence, lightweight two-piece suit with padded shoulders, big importance. Above the knee skirt, not more than an inch. Knees may have been en vogue in Scotland, but Africa was a wee bit behind la mode and a touch more conservative. Finally, I squeezed my feet into 3-inch heels, adding stature to my diminutive 5'1.5" and teetered down the red Murram Drive toward the esteemed Institute of Fashion Excellence. By the time I reached the entrance, a patina of dust had tinted my hair and clothes pink, a minor irritation of living in a hot equatorial country. I would have to acclimatize to the increased dust levels. Not a problem. I was adaptable. So my first impressions of the college, had to be said that they were a little bit disappointing. It's not exactly what I expected. And I had been in the college about 3 weeks, and I still hadn't met the proprietor. She had gone, when I arrived, she did have a funeral, and then she had to go to the States on a 2-week business trip. And so it was 3 weeks and I hadn't met her. And I thought, well, she could have taken 5 minutes to say, Jambo, Jennifer, welcome to the college. But it was 3 weeks later. And at the time when I arrived at the college, they were organizing a fashion show. And I thought that this was a perfect opportunity for me to show what I was worth and how I could organize an excellent professional fashion show. So I had taken over the management of it. Anyway, so on the day of the fashion show, I got a message to say that Mrs. Mulgai had wanted to see me. And I thought, well, at last, I've been here 3 weeks. I've organised a fashion show, and I've never even met the woman who owns the college. So I thought, well, she must be just wanting to congratulate me on such a good job that I've done. So I'd like to read you a little bit about my my first meeting with her. Enter. I suddenly felt uneasy, sensing the meeting would not be for praising my efforts. Mrs. M looked up, eyes draped in scorn. I was not invited to sit down. She pushed a pile of Katengi fabrics on the ginormous desk, occupying 90% of the office, towards me like a roulette croupier. I want these fabrics to be wrapped, draped, and tied around the models. A flush crept across my face. Had I misheard her? My palms started sweating. Pardon? She repeated herself. I had heard correctly. I protested. We've dressed the models in student work and had the final rehearsal, and it's too late to change at this stage. Her eyes bored into me. Make sure you do as I ask. That is all. You can go now. I was astounded, reprimanded on our first meeting. I turned to leave, laden with cloth and disappointment. So it was a bit of a knockdown for my ego that on our first meeting I was told off. And that actually set out the battle lines. The battle lines had already been set out because I reflected afterwards that because Mrs. Mulgai had advised that I speak to an ex-principal of the college in England so she could tell me all about the college. And I spoke to this ex-principal and I showed her what my salary was. And she said, there's no way that you can survive on that salary. You have, you need, if you want a roof over your head and you want electricity and you want running water and you want to live in a safe area, there's no way that you can survive on that type of salary. And so she advised me on what I should ask for. And I did ask for it, and Mrs. M acquiesced. But I didn't realize at the time that this must have stuck in her craw. And it was from day one, it was a battle between us. And so Mrs. M had invested in an untested business model and did not have a blueprint for a feisty, headstrong Scottish import with burning ambition and everything to prove. On the other hand, I had no blueprint for a female African entrepreneur. I had been appointed as a token principal, and I would do as I was told. I had given up everything for this mad escapade. Scotland was a world away. I had no backup plan, no cultural understanding, and no bloody idea. So you might have gathered by now that I didn't last that long in that college. In fact, I lasted 15 months. I had got the following December, I'd gone to home for Christmas. And when I came back, there was a letter under my door saying that I was no longer employed at the college, ostensibly because the immigration department hadn't approved my work visa. But I knew that was a lie. I'd never seen my work permit by the time I was there. And so I had come back, and on the same day as I was told that I didn't have a job, my boyfriend had picked me up from the airport, and he told me that he was dumping me on the same day, and he was getting married to somebody else, which was a bit of a shock. Anyway, so I found myself in Nairobi, no job, no money, no boyfriend, very few friends, and no family, and no support. And I thought, well, I can't go home now. I've told everybody that I've, about this job. I can't go home after 15 months and tell them I've got the sack. And I wasn't ready to go. I wasn't ready to go back. So I thought, well, something will turn up. I think it's amazing. When you're young, you think you have the faith that something will turn up, and you're a lot braver. You don't think of the negative consequences. So anyway, something did turn up. Woodgrove Fashion College. An advert appeared in the newspaper wanting a principal of a fashion college. And I thought this is absolutely remarkable. It's serendipitous, because these sorts of jobs don't come up very regularly. And I went for the interview, and I was hired on the spot, because of the colour of my face. The owner of the college had a group of schools in Kenya, and Woodgrove College was a technical college. It wasn't until later, I went back on holiday in 2022, and it wasn't until then that I realised that the previous principal of the college had been so traumatized by being robbed in Ngara, where the college was, that she left the college and the country, because the college was in a place called Ngara, and it was very different. It was very different from the leafy suburbs of my previous college. So I'd like to read you a little bit about this, where it was. It was said that anything could be bought anytime, anywhere, off any side street, from the back of any vehicle. Getting to the college on foot took a route through a narrow, dusty, fetid alleyway where pedestrians would frequently be detached from their belongings. On four wheels, it was reached by a rutted, sloping dirt track, which eventually led to an open sewer known in earlier times as the Nairobi River. And so it was very different from where I had been before. But I had free rein. I had free rein to do what I wanted in the college, apart from the fact, unless it costs a lot of money, I could organize the curriculum, or I could do the fashion shows as I wanted, do the projects. And so one of the things that I wanted to do when I went to Kenya was to make sure to get the students to design using their own cultural heritage, their own ethnicity, because they were looking to the West for inspiration. I said, look to your own cultural heritage. And so by this time, the students were doing a little bit more African designs. And there's an example of two of the designs the students had done, and that was taken in my garden. Also, my boss, trying to build up student numbers, decided that it would be a good idea to advertise in the paper every week about the college. And he insisted on having my face in this advert, which I absolutely hated, seeing my face in the paper every week. But he said that it was a good marketing ploy because, again, I was white, and that would attract more students because it was really white teachers were well respected. And it shows you just how much he used it. He said, the school that sets new horizons in fashion, highly professional coaching by Miss Jennifer Jackson and other qualified teachers. So I suppose that shows you exactly what he thought. Anyway, we did build up the college, and I'd been talking to him about moving, going somewhere else because of the dangers in Angara, and he wasn't that keen. But as it turned out, things happened that that changed the course of Woodgrove College. He had come down one afternoon. I had been out in business, I wasn't there. And he'd driven down in his gold Mercedes, his chauffeur-driven gold Mercedes, and stepped out of the car, and immediately his matching gold watch was stolen from his wrist. And so his chauffeur tried to chase after the thief, but he was far too fast for him. And so my boss, Mr. Barbara, got back in his car and left immediately. So traumatized was he. And so the next day, he called me into his office and he said, you can look for new premises. And so it's an ill wind that blows. So we found new premises in the centre of Nairobi. And so one of the projects that we did, I was now inspired to do a new project, and it was for the Kenyan athletic team. Now, the Kenyan athletic team are internationally, they're world class. Unfortunately, I didn't take any pictures of the designs, but that's Kip Keino, by the way, on the right hand side, who was a very famous Kenyan middle distance runner. Inspiration for one design project came to me after a dream. I was sitting in the stand of an Olympic stadium, cheering the Kenyan athletic team onto the track, dressed in kit designed by Woodgrove. I interpreted the vision as a sign that Woodgrove was in the running, so to speak, to design the team's uniforms. However, there was a tricky hurdle to jump over. Sportswear fabric was unavailable in Kenya, and I speculated on how to get around this fundamental design problem. The Kenyan flag was ubiquitous. Importantly, all students could afford to buy one, or even two or three. Tutors and students tackled the project enthusiastically. Bold flags emblazoned on backs, Kidogo flags inserted in pockets, etc., etc. The outfits would be a sensation on the catwalk and the track. The press was invited to the patriotic fashion show to launch the kit. Afterwards, I discovered that cutting up the Kenyan flag was an act of sedition. Thankfully, I had not landed in the bowels of Nile House, accused of disrespecting the national flag. I had been inspired in the name of design and innovation, not dissension. So the college was going well, the student numbers were increasing, and it was 1990, and Smirnoff came to town. Now, Smirnoff is an international brand, and they are very innovative in their PR and publicity. And every year they have an international fashion design competition for students. And they came to Kenya in 1990. And this for me was proof that I was in the right place at the right time. And I made it my mission. Every year it came around that my students would enter this competition. And in 1993, one of my students, I had a first place student and a third place student. And this is the outfit of Anne-Louise on the left, and that's the outfit made up. And so the students, they were chosen, and then they were given the money to make the outfit up. And one of my students won that year, and the prize was a trip to Brazil. So it was a fantastic opportunity for students to go on to the international stage. And I was very, very pleased when my students, I usually got more finalists than the college that I used to work for. So I was I was gloating a bit, but I won't say that, a little bit gloating. And also, there wasn't enough students to do a fashion show. So professional designers were invited to take part, not in the international final, but they were invited to take in the national finals. And one year, in 1995, I won. And so I'd like to read a little bit about my inspiration for my design in 1995. My design utilised bark cloth, traditionally used to wrap dead bodies in. But in the 1990s, it was a popular material for tourist curios. No one had used bark cloth in groundbreaking statement piece. I was a pioneer, elevating it from shroud and tourist hat into the annals of African fashion history. The dress was bubbled and beaded with a nod to traditional Maasai jewellery. The ensemble was accessorised with rubber sandals made from discarded car tyres, an idea I had plagiarised from the Nairobi street boys and had risked life and limb collecting from a dump in Ngara. Mzungu. Mzungu is the Swahili for white person. Mzungu, what are you doing here? The Juakali workers shouted as I searched among the tyres for the perfect rubber piece. Mzungus were always wealthy. Finding one rummaging in a heap of discarded tyres messed with their heads. The dump was their materials warehouse. I'm collecting rubber for a groundbreaking design concept for an international fashion design competition, I said, trying to stop myself retching from the stench and laughing nervously. I was most likely mad rather than wealthy, and they left me alone. So that year, I won, and I won the prize. There was a prize money for that rather than the international competition, and I got 80,000 shillings, which was about £800, and I took a trip to South Africa with it. It was wealth I'd never come across. I was always hand to mouth in Nairobi. And when I got the prize money, I thought, I'm going on holiday. And I went to South Africa, which was a very different Africa. I couldn't believe I was in Africa, comparing it against East Africa. But that's another story. So also when I was there, I wasn't just interested in teaching. I also wanted to start my own business. And I had convinced my boss that designing for the hospitality industry would be a good idea, because the hospitality industry in Kenya is quite big. And I'm sure some of you tonight have been on holiday in Kenya, have had your week on safari and your week in Mombasa or on the coast. So won I won the contract for Sarova Hotels. These are some of the designs that I did for Sarova Hotels, and had used the Maasai Shuka as inspiration for the designs. And nowadays it's used all the time in uniforms and in design. But in those days, it was only worn by Maasai, not by staff. So, and on the right there is a hostess outfit for the Thorntree Cafe. And the Thorntree Cafe is this famous cafe in central Nairobi, where all the colonials used to meet. And around the turn of the century, in the early part of the 20th century. And there's a thorn tree there where you put your messages. So it's quite an iconic cafe. So that's a little bit about my book. There's lots more to read about if you're interested. So I left Kenya in 1996 with my 4-year-old son. I had got married out in Nairobi. A marriage that didn't last, but he was a character. It wasn't very good to be married to, but he was great to write about. So I also write about that in my memoir. I had believed that I had so much to offer Kenya and Nairobi and the students, but I gained so much. In fact, I gained more than I could offer. Today there is a thriving fashion industry, and there's a lot of creative talent in Kenya. Unfortunately, it hasn't made an impact on the international stage, but it's heading in the right direction. Nowadays, there is a much bigger middle class in Kenya, so there are people with money to spend on clothes. Because in the past, if you had money, you would go out and buy your clothes in Europe. I learned so much when I was there. I learned that I love teaching. I learned that people were just the same, no matter what color they were. We all want the same things. We want a better life for ourselves and for our children. I discovered there's a lot of stories. It wasn't all fun and games. There's a lot of difficult things that happened to me as well, and people that I met that were a little bit untrustworthy. So I discovered that there were good people and there were not so good people, and the trick was to differentiate between them, to recognize that, which I think I did learn a little bit more about. Some may say I became a little bit cynical, but I don't like to call it that. But overall, I wouldn't have changed the experience for a lifetime. I learned so much, and I am such a different person now that I've come back. So that's the end of my talk, and I'd like to thank Anna and the SWI for giving me this opportunity to present my book. And I believe now that we have 15 minutes for questions. So we will have them. I will answer as much as I can.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thanks everyone for listening. If anyone has any questions just now, feel free to unmute, or if you don't want to speak up, you can pop something in the chat and Jennifer can hopefully answer it for you. I'll also put some information about Jennifer's book signing, which is happening on Thursday, in the chat, and a link to where you can purchase the book. Okay.